Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! And here's Limpar, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal in front.
Saturday was exciting. Attacking play was inviting. There was snow on the ground. We're sending Sam down, playing in a Tierney Wonderland. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name's Elliot Smith, Black Man, Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Yeah, look, I don't know if you understood, but for me it was pretty clear. The minute you saw those snowflakes and you saw Tierney, no gloves, no snood, no leggings, you knew he was scoring a wonder goal, and he did that indeed. I have to say, though, I did enjoy seeing Ainsley Maitland-Niles dressed for teaching his hot yoga class after the game, so that was good. What a fun day. What a fun club. Where did this come from? 2021 already looking up, and I just want to say thanks, everyone, for being here. We've got so much happening this month. Clive and I will be doing our first Transfer Rumor Pod for patrons this week. We have a Smith Rowe retrospective. You say, how can it be a retrospective? Because we're going to examine his time at Huddersfield, understand that a little better with a special guest. So that's coming up. Lots of good stuff coming up. But right now, what is coming up is hopefully a great pod about a great win. And here to talk about it with me is Paul. You can find him on Twitter at Pause My Pants. Hello, Pause.
Woohoo!
And Clive. You can find him on Twitter at ClivePFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello, hello.
And Tim. You can find him on Twitter at Roberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
Tim, good New Year. I assume, a big dinner with friends out at the restaurant and then clubbing till dawn, something like that. Yeah, everyone. Tim, did you go dinner and clubbing? I assume.
No.
No dinner, no clubbing.
Absolutely nothing.
Clive, I assume jetted.
I was working on my video.
Yeah, well, we know that. Paul leads a sad life in a video studio, making videos of sinking Sam Allardyce talking to horses neighing. You should check that out on Twitter. Clive, I assume, jetted off to Ibiza, clubbing all night, and then back to London for maybe like a breakfast cocktail. Yeah.
I mean, lockdown life, really quiet.
No, yeah.
Just simple.
Yeah,
go for a walk, come back home, start drinking and eating. That's the life I'm leading.
Yeah. I did obviously the Concorde to Paris, partied there, Concorde back, and then just, back to regular life. So no, none of us did any of that. We all sat home, did nothing, stared at the walls we've been staring at for a long time. But you know what? We did get to watch some exciting attacking football. By the way, guys, this is me trying to do that friendly banter waffle stuff that Arseblog and Gunnerblog do at the beginning of their podcast. And I don't know if you guys are just perplexed by why I'm doing it.
Andrew actually the difference is Andrew actually likes hhis guest.
Yeah, no, that is a substantial difference. I mean, the lack of animosity and antipathy between the participants is a crucial part of it. But the just total lack of give and take here is suddenly making me realize that we have nothing between one another other than just discussing football, and I'm quite heartbroken about it. Thankfully, the football is worth discussing. Tim, anything else you want to add to that wordy intro that you did?
No.
Great. Super. Alrighty then. Well,
I did stuff, all right?
You did
Mind your
stuff.
own business.
Great. Let me just ask, because this would make me feel a hell of a lot better about what just happened. Can you guys actually hear me at all? Or is this one of those situations where my internet is so bad you're not trying to be rude to me, you just can't hear me?
It's going okay because I can hear about half the words and Clive hears the other half, and then we message in the chat and put it together.
Yeah, and that's all we need, really. We only hear half what you say, and we answer our own questions anyway, so just get on with it.
Touche. This has been a humbling introduction for me, I have to say. I'm hang on, let me just make podcast note. No more friendly banter at the beginning. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, you're terrible at it. You are terrible.
Look,
you're just a mean person.
I'm a facilitator. That's all. I'm just trying to facilitate things. And speaking of facilitators, we will get into our lovely facilitator, Emil Smith Rowe. So look, let's get on with it. And Tim, I'll start with you because you seem bursting at the seams with things to say this fine day. Look, this is a thing now. Enjoying watching Arsenal play. And it's a thing that I think we're all going to have to adapt to and hopefully adapt to long term. It is a thing obviously sparked by the introduction of some youngsters. Now, I think there was a lot of concern about whether Arteta would be able to continue to play the trio of Smith Rowe, Saka, and Martinelli what would have been the third game in 7 days. He opted to rest Martinelli. It worked out brilliantly, but once again, Smith Rowe and Saka were at the heart of it. I'm curious for you, do you think that this sort of revitalization of our attacking play is purely down to the influence of Smith Rowe in that position between the lines, or is there a tactical tweak here that maybe isn't getting headlines, isn't being noticed as much because so much of the focus is on that trio of youngsters?
No, I think it's not entirely, but when I say entirely down to Smith Rowe, I don't necessarily mean him as an individual. The presence of like a competent number 10 or attacking 8, whatever you want to label him as, just to knit things together. It's just brought a couple of players up a level. I think first off, it's brought the best out of Saka, having someone to combine with. We've seen Saka on the right a couple of times and he's been okay. He hasn't been this good. Again, which is not a criticism of him, because he's been bloody brilliant, quite frankly, this season. But he's gone up a level. He was playing in all of those defeats, and he didn't look this good. And I just think having someone to combine with him and Smith Rowe really seem to have a really good understanding. It's brought the best out of Lacazette, because all of a sudden he's got runners all around him, which is exactly what he needs, exactly what he hasn't had. Players bursting beyond him. You look at that second goal, and Lacazette is a part of that, almost in the way that Giroud used to be a part of those kind of tiki-taka goals that you saw. He just he saw some passing and he thought, oh, okay, almost like a bee going towards a flower. He thought, oh, okay, there's something interesting happening here. I quite like the look of this. And then he plays the pass round the corner, and crucially after that, Smith Rowe and Saka are the ones that run beyond him. He doesn't really go anywhere after that, and that's been a problem in recent weeks. But it's not a problem when he's got guys bursting beyond him. So he comes short, he links. The two younger players just go running beyond him. That is exactly, and again, Lacazette is much better than the player we have seen earlier this season. And I've always attributed that mainly to the loss of Ramsey and Ozil, who are two players I think he really enjoyed playing with, to do that kind of short combination play. So I think you're getting a much better Lacazette as a result. You're getting a much better Saka. And then in midfield, he's only played one of the games. I thought Ceballos looked much better, as I suspected he would, with the presence of a number 10 ahead of him, because Ceballos is that guy that sits between two different spokes of the wheel. He's the guy that sits between your 6 and your 10 and, receives the ball off one and gives it to the other. He looked much better. And so you can see, much beyond the actual individual himself, Smith Rowe, just the presence of that extra. And it's not, the thing is with Smith Rowe as well, I think that's crucial, is not just what he's doing as a number 10 in terms of knitting things together. And, all of a sudden we got Tierney on the left and he's not playing centre back and left back now. He's just left back. We've got Saka on the right. That's threat on the right. We've got someone in the middle connecting it all. But the other thing that Smith Rowe does that is so important, you saw on the third goal, is he gets in the box as well. He's got that kind of little bit of Ramsey to his play, and we saw that against Chelsea where he got forward and he just missed that Bellerin cutback. And then you look at the third goal against West Brom, the ball comes off the post, he's there again. Last 3-4 months there would be nobody there, that would just bounce out to a defender, off you go, see you later. But he's there to have the second shot. And then and that goal just proves the efficacy of shooting a lot, because it happened. All right, fair play. One time it's a West Brom defender who takes a shot for us. But what you're seeing as well is, and then you look at the fourth goal with Lacazette, it's a cross from Tierney, right? And how much have we kind of complained about crossing? Not crossing so much, but the conversation we've been having is where you cross from. Look at where Tierney crosses that from. He's in the area, on the byline, drills that in. It's a can't miss chance. He's not out on the touchline trying to toss it in almost at random towards the penalty spot. And I think just having some players a little bit closer together, a little bit more connected, we're just getting the ball into better positions basically. And when we get
Smith Rowe is in the 6-yard box on that one too. He's just a yard back from Laka.
Indeed, which takes focus off Lacazette, so that all of the West Brom defenders aren't then just around him, and there's just so much more fluidity to it. And I guess maybe this is a discussion we'll have, but I guess the question for Arteta, one of many questions, is, Smith Rowe can't play every minute of every game, so what do we do when he can't play?
Well, and that's sort of where my question is hinting at a little bit, because I think, as important as Smith Rowe, Martinelli, and Saka have been in this run, and Smith Rowe the most important in terms of how he's changed the dynamic, I think it is a tactical tweak that can be done without Smith Rowe. Maybe we don't have anyone else who will do it quite as well. But to your point about Lacazette, that beautiful goal that Saka scores, where does Lacazette play his little layoff pass from? The edge of the box. He's been playing those passes for the last year. Where's he been playing him from? The midfield stripe. You know what I mean? He finishes 2 chances in the box because he's not trying to huff and puff his way back from central midfield that he's been occupying. I think one of the tweaks that has been really relevant here is in going to the 4-2-3-1, it's not just that we have a player between the lines. It's that players are in much more natural positions, and they look, the automatisms, the sort of intuitive play just seems a lot better. And I really liked when Arteta first arrived, this sort of Pep style calculus football where players, he's a fullback tucked in center back stroke midfielder who becomes the 10. Like, it's neat and it's evolutionary and it's exciting. But what you realize is for the players, it's also damn confusing. And the players just seem to be occupying much more straightforward positions now that they seem to understand. Tierney gets to be a fullback, which is what he's excellent at. Smith Rowe gets to play between the lines. The central midfielders occupy central spaces. The wingers get to come in from wide spaces, and the striker gets to be around the box. And it does work. And Clive, what we've seen as a result is sort of what we saw on Thursday nights this season. Combination play around the area, more bodies around the penalty area. And the funny thing is, it's not like West Brom didn't ever have opportunities to hurt us in this game. But when you put up almost 4 expected goals, that doesn't matter. That's what when we talked about variance, the reason it mattered so much is when your XG is 0.3 and theirs is 0.4, you need every break to go your way. When your XG is 4, you battered them, and you're going to batter them, and we did. And sure, they had a little half chance here or threat there, but who cares? So, for you, when you look at that combination play around the area, and the way we have pushed Paul's toothpaste up the tube, as he has discussed for ages, and while I am sick to death of it, he's proven right. Do you think that the tactical tweak, as much as the personnel tweak, is a big part of it, and that it can be reproduced even when we have to maybe use other personnel to get it done?
Yeah, I hope so. Otherwise, we're doomed, aren't we? And so,
well, it's true. Sunny,
I never look at. We get wrapped up in these first 11s, and I'm as soon as I see somebody that does well, I'm already thinking, okay, how can he be replaced? Because that's how you manage things. You don't wrap your whole life into 1 or 2 players. You wrap it up into a philosophy and a pattern and a way of working, a way of playing. Right. So the good thing is, I was thinking actually a bit of a Tim thing. Actually, I went back in time a little bit. Went back in time to 2008, 2009, when we had a number of number 10s in our team. So we had Rosicky, Kleb, Diaby, Fabregas, all these type of Nasri, that type of era. Right. So, and they're all number 10s really. They're all number 10s deployed in different areas of the pitch. And at the time, I was thinking, this is crazy football. Even Van Persie played in there. So it's like another number 10, or Adebayor. So I thought, this is crazy football. But actually, it was something that's really quite modern. Because what you developed was a pattern of play that was really replicated by rotation, by movement, by switching positions, taking each other's positions, but really intelligence on the football. And what that team lacked was the ability to stand up to being kicked off the pitch, which wasn't allowed because these foreigners came in and showed the British how to play. So we have to kick them. So we've got to make it hard for them. Do you know what I mean? Let's not give them any protection, because that would be stupid. What else that team lacked was a little bit of a defensive strategy. So there wasn't the big emphasis on pressing, wasn't a big emphasis on counter fouling as there is today. Imagine those players today with today's modern defensive strategy tactics. They'd never get run on because they just foul people quickly. They could all get to the sprint really quickly. And so it'd be really interesting to watch that team in this era. And what I'm looking at with Arsenal is we've just seen two or three more players in the team that are playing with what Arteta called one brain. And one brain, really, for me, I love that statement. You're trying to get players that are like-minded, that move off each other, that work out how each other play. And when you saw the second goal, that's a one-brain goal. It just came from players that understand movements, understand receiving on the safe side, understand when to go inside rather than outside, allow space for a runner, third man run. They could see that goal developing before it happened. Right? So that is a classic one-brain goal. So when people say, oh, Arteta's system, for me, that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to create, he said it in one of his first interviews, he's trying to create a team that thinks as one. And I think the players that we've seen think alike. So we look at the players and what they do, but actually, they just think alike. There's really smart things, like when Xhaka goes to press the ball, Smith Rowe goes to double pivot. He's making tackles in front of the back four. He's not looking at his mate going to press the ball and thinking, I'm number 10, I'm going to run next to him. No, I'm going to go back and fill in for him. Yeah. That's one brain. That's smart football. And I think we overemphasize. I look at it differently, right? Because obviously I look at it from a repeatability perspective rather than what have I just seen. So I'm thinking, when I see these movements, this can be repeated. When I see it's linked with certain players, we'll probably go into that later in the week, Elliot, but I'm really excited by it because these are intelligent footballers. And so when I was moaning about us being dumb, I just wanted to look back at some of the dumb football we played. That
must have been fun.
Dumb. I mean,
that doesn't sound like a fun way to spend your day, but be my guest.
It's just like when you see it and you're watching the screen, no, don't turn that way. Oh my God, you've turned that way. Oh no, you've gone backwards. Why you go backwards? I think one or two things have really been quite quickly. Obviously, the additions of the young players, great. Squeezing up the back line. I'm convinced that's a big thing. Making sure we pass forward. We saw the Chelsea game when we passed forward. We saw the first half of the Brighton game when we reverted back to type and how we looked. Because straight away people are not moving because they don't know when the ball's coming. And we moved back to the certainty of passing forward sharply, following your pass against West Brom. Suddenly we look connected. Suddenly we have passing options. Simple principles put in place and held in place. And also held in place by the players to say, I'm not accepting that backward pass it forward. Because now we can trust you. He's coming. He's coming from our back players holding. It's coming from our centre mid like Xhaka. It's coming. I can move. I can drop in. I can go and support. I can go and connect. My run will not be wasted. Then we look connected.
Yeah.
Right? And we've got people giving us the examples. They're leading by examples, and the people that are leading by examples are not the ones we thought it would be. And that's been the surprise for me. But the philosophy is here. Now it's about adding to it, tweaking a few positions, getting rid of some idiots and the stupid ones, and adding some more brains. Add more brains, and we'll see this again. And it will look different all the time because the thing about creative players, the real creative ones that are good, they almost don't know what they're going to do. They're going to create something and invent something, but they just need people around them that think like them to make it really work.
Yeah, well said. I appreciate eliminating stupidity wherever and whenever possible. And to the extent that we have eliminated stupid football, I am here for it. Paul, I want to just hone in on the Saka goal for a minute, and we can come to the Tierney one maybe next. I realize that was the first one chronologically, but the Saka goal, I think, is sort of a really interesting example of the difference both in terms of tactics and in terms of the quality of the players. So the things that really light up for me here, Bellerin gets it. He slides it over to Smith Rowe, who plays it in to Saka, who plays it in to Smith Rowe, who lays it off to Lacazette, who turns and plays it out to Smith Rowe and then back to Saka. And I think the things that are really neat about this, first of all, the guy popping up between the lines is great and all that, but both Smith Rowe and Saka carry on their run. Now, if you watch that goal really carefully, right? When the ball goes into Lacazette, Saka holds his run just for a minute, like he's going to stop. He kind of hesitates just for a split second. You can watch it. And he looks to the right and he sees that Smith Rowe has kept going. And the minute he sees that, he turns on the jets again and gets into the box to score. And I think it's that sort of critical moment where he realizes, oh, there's a player making that run. There's a player taking that risk. There's a player taking that responsibility. And I just think that we've seen a lot of players who want to come inside, who want to stay deep, who don't want to run beyond, who aren't adventurous, who don't want to go score goals, go push the ball forward, go drive into dangerous areas. And so that goal isn't just about spacing, isn't just about individual talent, but I think it's also about intention to play, like Clive always talks about. So for you, what are some of the moments in that goal that stand out, not just in terms of the quality, although certainly important, but also in terms of a different dynamic from what we've seen maybe in the way other players have approached, those kinds of attacking moves?
Yeah, so the first thing that struck me after the goal was that this was kind of a return to we're better than you football. This was kind of football on speed. And there's just a moment. Bellerin does this nothing pass to Smith Rowe, who first time again, immediately around the corner, knocks it to Saka, who flicks it to Laka. And Laka's pass is not to be underestimated. It's by far the most technical of all the passes in the connection. Everything else is just speed and automatism and kind of ESP mind reading. And the moment Laka flicks it off to ESR, you just see the two guys are just they're whoring into the box. Him and Saka just hit the go button, and they don't just get past their back line, they tear past them. There's nobody even close by the time ESR flicks it across to Saka. They're just straight through, done and gone. And it's like, whoa, they're working at a speed twice kind of what anything on the West Brom side can come up with, twice anything we've seen for so long. And that stuff just creeps into the game. You have the Ceballos on 15 minutes does that no-look round the corner pass over the top to Saka, where he knows he's going to make that run. People know that the other guy's going to make the run now. And so it's that understanding that it's go time. The pass comes, you go for it. And they tried a couple of other things before that didn't quite come off, but nearly did. And that's just those guys get close enough to each other. You get the overload with Smith Rowe, Bellerin, Laka, and Saka, and it's like who's flicking it to who, and then we go. It was special. It was a moment, a throwback moment to the best of Wenger ball. And the wearing your socks down, which he didn't do at Huddersfield, Smith Rowe, but he's doing here, is a statement, I think, that there's no point in trying to kick me. My feet won't be there. I mean, he jumps, people are still hacking at him. He just jumps over the tackles. If he gets fouled at the moment, it's because he wants the foul or because you've bodied him. But, he's got that Grealish thing of, I'm putting my socks down. I want you to come at me. Saka has it too. He's got a bit of the Arjen Robbins with him, not in terms of not the same body language, but he's over there on the right, and they know about him now, and he's fine with that because that means you got a decision to make as a defender, and they're beginning to play with players. The socks down thing, Saka kind of flirting with the full back who's thinking, holy shit, it's Saka. I mean, he can go either way now, as Tim talked about on the last pod. He can take it onto his right and put that cross in, and it'll be a good cross. He'll get a shot off, which he's getting better and better at. I put my little video together yesterday and circulating it. But one of the things that struck me after watching these clips time and time again is suddenly there was that thing I hadn't noticed. You know that psychological study where they have a bunch of people on the stage throwing a ball to each other and nobody notices a man in a gorilla suit walking around because you've been told to count the number of passes between people. Have you ever seen that thing? A YouTube video?
Sure.
It's kind of fascinating because I did all of this editing and I've been talking about ESR for a bit. And then I went back and looked at all the clips and I just watched ESR's movement. Holy fuck. He's so good. He's so it's a terrible, unfair comparison to make, because I've talked about the Ramsey thing, and I think there really is a lot of that Ramsey about him, the flicks and then the tearing into the box, into the 6-yard box. I have him down as our fourth man because he'll always be one of the four men, but he's actually often the second, third, sometimes first into the box. He just pours in there. But the thing I was going to say that he reminds me about, that's the Ramsey comp. The Ozil comp for me, which is the one I'm afraid to make, is very early Ozil, when he used to play a ball and tear up the pitch, or he'd move into space really quickly, but it's immediate. And his movement into little pockets, his simple but beautiful little arcs where he goes, he heads up but over to the right or into a little pocket very, very quickly. Such fast decision making. If you watch the video I put out for any reason, the best reason is just watch ESR's movement and where he goes. And he just, time and time again, he doesn't run into the box like other people do. Like the Willock comparison is just unfair on Willock now, because for me, Willock is more of an 8 who will run into the box, but that's where the comparison with ESR stops.
Well, the technical level is night and day. I mean, there's no comparing that.
Well, that's the first thing that comes to your mind to disqualify. But I actually think it's the runs that are truly the difference. The difference between running into the box and then look at what ESR does in terms of his runs, where he goes. Every little move is a move to somewhere. He's never just standing somewhere. There's something really special there with ESR. Yeah. Those little movements, like even on that goal, look where he goes. He's to the left of Bellerin, but he's to the right, putting that cross in.
It's super intelligent. I mean, he knows where the space is to go. It doesn't make any sense for him to just stay central, so he vacates that space, and that gives Saka the room to run beyond Lacazette. No, it's brilliant. And I mean, we're going to do a dedicated podcast on him this week, and I'm excited to do it. And it's like, I just want to try to identify how much is him, a lot, by the way, and how much is the tactical tweak, the positioning of a player in that space. And again, I don't know that we have another player that would play the role as effectively as him, but to Clive's point, we're going to have to find ways to play like this with different players in the team. And I don't think we have a player quite like Smith Rowe, but I hope we've learned a lesson here because, obviously there is going to be a Crapatron situation here. And Paul, I don't know if you ran West Brom through the Crapatron, but I imagine that it crapped out a pretty crappy number. Is that fair?
Well, they were pretty good for the first, until the Tierney goal and the Saka goal. They were actually reasonable competition. I would have had them at a 7.3, but they dropped to a 2.1 third level by the time the second goal went in.
Yeah, they lost the will to live, and I don't think they particularly care to play for Sam Allardyce, which is understandable. But here's the point. The problem for Arsenal hasn't been playing competitive football in the big games. The problem for Arsenal has been playing consistent attacking football against weaker sides. We've beaten some smaller teams by, 1-0 with 0.7 XG to 0.3. This was 4 expected goals. This was 22 shots. This was players around the area. And I think the reason I get excited about a performance like this isn't because of the quality of the competition. It's precisely because they suck. And because we played the way a big club should play against a bad team. Pressure them, push them back, force them to capitulate, and we did all of that. And I think that is what we needed to see. Not that we could grind out a result against a big team playing counterattacking football, but that we could play front-footed football and dominate. And we did that. And I think that's really exciting. And look, to Paul's point, Tim, West Brom started reasonably okay, tolerable, and it was up to Kieran Tierney to open the scoring. And he does so spectacularly. I think Kieran Tierney's cult status, I think his cult hero status, the Tesco bag thing, the no gloves in the snow thing, is unfortunately does a disservice to him because he winds up being seen as this gritty, hard-nosed character, and so he doesn't get the praise for some of the technical quality and skillfulness of his play. I thought early in the season he was kind of a push and run guy in some respects, but what you're seeing now is there's a real additional level to his game. He slid a beautifully cultured pass across to Smith Rowe for a near goal. I guess it was against Brighton maybe against Chelsea. He rounds the defender and gets to the byline for the penalty. Here he tricks his way past the fullback twice and curls in a beautiful shot from inside the box, powerfully to open the scoring. These aren't just gritty plays, push, run, and cross. He also has the assist for Lacazette, of course, which is a cross, but from the inside the box, as you pointed out. These are plays of exceptional quality and skillfulness. And so I think we really are very fortunate to have this guy here at 23. He's basically Maitland-Niles' age, right? A guy who we really still hope makes it. I mean, he's a little older, but this is a guy who has made it and still probably has another level to go up. So in addition to maybe waxing lyrical about that goal, do you have any thoughts on how maybe the switch to being more of a true fullback has let him express some of the quality in his game that he wasn't able to previously?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just allowed him to push, just to play a little bit higher up the pitch, because, I mean, it's almost redundant to say when you're also the third centre-back, you kind of got to look after your post there a little bit, and you've probably got to be, not have trepidation, but you've got to be a bit cautious about just pushing up the line, and what he's doing now is just pushing up the line and going up and going up. And initially, I think I said after the Chelsea pod, I thought that a lot of that was to do with Martinelli, because, when Martinelli's ahead of you, pressing everyone and running after everything, then you've kind of got to get behind that. But, again, Martinelli wasn't there. And look, he was behind Aubameyang, who, is still a pretty good player, but not the same type. And I think what I really feel like is that Tierney's really found his place in this team. I mean, not that I didn't feel like that at the beginning of the season anyway. I think Tierney's star has been on the rise for a little while, certainly with the fans. I completely agree with you. I think a lot of that is down to him being a bit of a cult hero. And, we should say that Bellerin played in short sleeves as well. But obviously he doesn't quite have that that Scottish stereotype, I guess, going on. But I said this on the Instant Reaction pod, but I just finished finally reading the 89 book by Amy Lawrence, and and she interviews lots of people about that 1989 team, and like Nick Hornby was saying, it's really. What was special about that team is you didn't feel like you were going to lose the players, and it was this kind of unique blend of guys who'd had to work to get to Arsenal, and you felt like they felt quite privileged to play for Arsenal, but at the same time you weren't worried about Barcelona and Juventus taking them, and that he felt like that was a real moment in time that might not be repeated, and it probably won't. But Tierney feels like that kind of player, I guess, and I'm not sure whether his Britishness has anything to do with that, and I really, on one hand, I think that would probably make sense, just because if you grow up somewhere, you've probably got, like a better sense, not a better sense of the pecking order of football clubs, but do you know what I mean? When you grow up in that culture,
yeah, of course, yeah,
it's just kind of natural that which is obviously not to say that foreign players can't feel like that, and we've had tons of foreign players that obviously do, and we've had a lot of British players who don't. But it feels like Celtic to Arsenal feels like almost like quite an old-fashioned trajectory that we might have seen in like the 80s, like with Charlie Nicholas or something like that, or maybe the early 90s. Yeah.
Can I add? It was very interesting that Gary Neville does his something box thing, and he had Wayne Rooney, and they were talking about when Rooney was pushing to leave United, and they just had a real chat around. Rooney was saying, it was different for me. You guys were United lads, which is kind of a weird thing to say but to your point, it's different depending on what country you came from and that hierarchy of clubs. And I agree with you. I think when you look at Tierney, you think he's probably a lifer at Arsenal. It doesn't get from where he's been to where he's going. He's the kind of guy who'll say, well, I could butterfly around, but this is a top level club and I can be a player for this club. He's a career kind of player. He wants to spend one career. He'd love it to have been Celtic, but they weren't in the Premier League. Yeah. It's Arsenal, and it is different for different players. For foreign players,
Can I interject there, though? I actually disagree. Well, yeah.
Well, it's different for foreign players. It's different for players who move from one club to another club within the Premier League. There is something special. I do think that's an Arsenal throwback thing to players of old who moved from a smaller club to Arsenal, and depending on their mentality. Tierney is a different character, but he's a throwback to that. So
yeah, I think there's Please go ahead, Tim, and then I'll be the curmudgeon and explain why I disagree with all this.
Sure. I guess the only other thing I'd say is Tierney. It's a nice balance, actually. On one hand, I must admit I had some doubts about buying a player from Celtic because the Scottish League is not what it was, to say the least. And I was thinking, if we'd bought a left back from maybe, I don't know, Olympiacos or, because that's the kind of level that the Scottish League is at now. Would we have doubts about his ability to adapt? But what you do get when you buy a player from a club like that is you buy a player from a club who is used to winning, who's used to attacking teams and pushing teams back from fullback. Like, for example, Shakhtar Donetsk had loads of Brazilian players, and most of them adapted beautifully when they went to other bigger European clubs because they were used to winning, and playing in a club that was used to winning all of the major trophies in their country. And on one hand, you can have fears about the level they're playing at, but on the other hand, if you're a big club, sometimes it makes sense to buy from someone who's maybe I'm going to upset some Celtic for anyone within a Celtic affiliation, but someone who's and look, Celtic are huge, are absolutely
be careful, Tim. They are very
huge.
big.
Yes, yeah, no, they are. Like, in a modern context, they are a big club in the Scottish League, and times have changed. But in terms of like their support and their size, they are enormous because they are not just a Scottish club. They have the whole Irish connection as well, and Celtic and Rangers. It obviously it goes across football lines, but they are huge football clubs with huge expectations, and so actually maybe my thinking was a little bit wrong. And obviously as long as the player you buy is good enough, it's probably quite a good thing for Arsenal to buy a player from a club like that.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, like, he came from the biggest club in his country, a massive club, to one of the top 5 or 6 clubs in England. I mean, is it different from going to Valencia from Celtic? Valencia is bigger than Celtic in a modern context. They're not a bigger club. Arsenal is a bigger club than Celtic in my view. But like, I don't know. But I think the thing that I want to challenge,
Madrid and Barca, right?
Well, I want to challenge the idea, and Clive, I want you to come in this. I want to challenge the idea that just because a guy's gritty and he seems like us, he cares and he's a fighter and he doesn't wear gloves and he's great, like, that we tend to think that's, that the players don't leave because the club screwed up or the contract guy is bad or they're too good for our club. The players leave because they don't care. They're not passionate. They're not gritty. They're other. They're foreign. They're, and this guy gets us and isn't foreign in the he is foreign, but you know what I mean? In the sort of not one of us kind of sense and he isn't gritty. Like, the club still has to manage the contract, right? The club still has to match his ambition. If the player continues on this trajectory, if he looks, he's 23, if at 25 he's playing even better than this, and he's one of the best fullbacks in England, and he's scoring goals and creating assists and cutting out counterattacks, and we haven't managed the contract right, or the club hasn't pulled itself out of this mire, I don't think we can rely on his grit and caring and not wearing gloves in the snow keeping him here. And I just want to be careful that the tropes of culture and personality don't lead us to think that the club still doesn't have to manage a situation right now. I don't want to drag this down. It's so exciting that we have this guy and what he means. And Tim, I am fully on board with cult hero status kind of guy, that he can be that guy. The club still has to get it right. You know what I mean? The club still has to move back up the table and reassume its rightful place in English football and manage the contract right. And the player's going to start to turn heads at some of the biggest clubs if he plays like this going forward. So there's a lot more to it than just personality. I think, Tim, Clive, you didn't want to be cut out here, understandably, and I do want to get on to more of the goals and the fun stuff. But so how do you feel about that sort of attachment that we feel to players and then project that the players feel the same as we do?
Yeah, player attachment is very, very personal to lots of people, and I'm online too, and I see what people are saying about him, and they like him, and fair play to them. We like certain players for certain reasons, and the things that excite me about him is I'm hearing rumours about him being, very competitive in training, bringing intensity levels up. They have to calm him down. I love that because I have a suspicion that historically that it's been a bit Crest-like at London Colney, and I want to see that change. So somebody comes in, brings in that mentality. I like that. I like the fact he's not just showing it in training. He's not just showing it by wearing the short sleeve T-shirts and warm-ups and all the rest of it. He's showing it by his bravery on the football pitch. At a time when 2 weeks ago, one of the lowest periods my Arsenal watching life, and it needed somebody like him and like Martinelli and like Smith Rowe and like Saka, and there's about 3 or 4 others that said, no, we are not having it. We are not having this. We are going to play our game. We're not too afraid to play. And that sort of stuff is what will stick in people's minds. That will make him a cult hero. What he does on the football pitch and how he plays and how he transmits himself to us. And I think that's a big thing in football, particularly down this virtual world we're all living in. How players are transmitting themselves by what their actions and what they're doing. I don't know if it's
Clive, I think you make a great point because he opened up 2 of the last 3 games. It was his individual moment that opened up the first goal in 2 games.
Yeah, and I think he's not just doing it with blood and guts. I mean, we've got 2 attacking fullbacks, and the one on the left-hand side seems to be in quite good positioning defensively as well. There's a difference there. Do you see what I mean? And that's about timing, that's about commitment, that's about when you run, how committed you are, how you play in your own game pod on the left-hand side, what you do, just how you play is so certain that people can work with you, and people love that about certain players. They're easy to play with, and I imagine he's really easy to play with because of his effort and his work rate. And football fans connect with people for different reasons. I always felt that David Beckham had a great way to transmit himself to the Man United fans with his effort and how he played and his skill and technique as well. But they felt he played like they would play. And I think as a fan, you look on the pitch and think, he plays like I would like to play in my own mind. Do you see what I mean? Why he does what we would want to do if we were able, had the talent and weren't 5 stone heavy that you need to be. Do you know what I mean? And that's why I think people really connect with him. That's my opinion anyway, but I take Tim's points, absolutely.
And I agree with all that. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying Tierney will go. I'm saying that, I think it is important that we not believe that it is the players having the right mindset, the right culture, the right mentality, the right attitude that keeps them at the club or not at the club, because I think that exonerates the club from responsibility. And look, it can surprise you. I mean, look, there are players who are foreign in the sense that they have a home club, a home country they want to go back to. There's, players who get just too big for the situation. There's Ronaldo leaving United. There's Cesc leaving Arsenal to go to his home club. There's examples of this. But, also Michael Owen and David Beckham, went to Real Madrid. I'm sure there were fans at the time that were talking about them as England boys who'd be here forever and have the right approach. And, things change. So, I don't. But
Beckham fell out with Ferguson, as opposed to, of course, he wanted to move. So I think you're right, but you're if you phrase it in a way that, depending on the player, it can be both. Because the Rooney Neville conversation is very instructive. Neither of them, they both immediately get that Neville and Giggs are United players, and that Rooney isn't, right? And it's not about being foreign, right? He's just not a United player. And there is an aspect in terms of hierarchy where we would see in old Arsenal teams guys from lesser clubs come to Arsenal, and that's good enough for them for their whole career. And I take, this isn't every player, right? We're not saying every player feels like this. I get what Tim's saying, this is specific to a Tierney type, which is, Tierney might be unhappy and go back up north, but his next move isn't looking around to go to Barcelona or Real Madrid or something else.
Can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question about that? Let's say 2 seasons from now, Real Madrid came in with a £60 million bid for Tierney. Do you think you'd be like, nah, I'm happy? I mean, I guess I just can't. I don't know why
I
we would
think
presume.
Tierney might be the one who says, I prefer a career at Arsenal. I think he might be. Do I think he definitely would be? No. Now, Bellerin and Barcelona comes in with £100 million. He's the greatest thing since sliced bread instead of a £20 million.
Well, we put him on the plane whether he wants to go or not. At that point, that's not an issue. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a bit player specific.
Sure.
You can make a ridiculous proposition but I think, as that wasn't happening to these Arsenal players in 1989, right? Real Madrid wasn't coming in with 100. So like for like in those kinds of situations, he does feel a little different. But you're still right. The club has to do it right. The contracts have to be right. Players shouldn't be fools. They have much more active agents these days than they did in 89. Movement is much more, it's all,
look what everybody knows
Cole. What everybody's on. Back in the day, you didn't know what other players were getting paid.
Yeah. Well, look at Ashley Cole. A little snafu in terms of offering, the money he wanted, and a guy who was an Arsenal man wound up at Chelsea, right?
Sure. But then the personality comes, there's a lot of factors, right? Maybe it's hindsight, but I'd never say Ashley Cole and Kieran Tierney are the same kinds of personalities. Tierney's a lifer. He'd love to have just stayed at Celtic for his whole bloody life and ruled the world.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's not bury ourselves under this conversation because it's one that is a long way off, and hopefully he will be here for a long time playing top level football. And I think what I'd like for us as a fan base is to see him beyond the Tesco bag and the no gloves in the snow, because I think that cult hero status is fun. I think there's a really exceptional player that we're starting to see in terms of his technical level, which I have to admit I didn't initially know whether it was in there, and I think he's gone up a level.
Him in my full back of the decade.
Yeah, no, that was, I have to admit, you were ahead of your time, and you may wind up being right after all. Having said that, it is a different decade. But anyway, so look, one of the things that I think, Tim, we have an interesting dynamic going on here is the Lacazette Aubameyang thing, because Lacazette has kind of rediscovered his form in a role that suits him a lot better, a more of a true number 9 role, not this weird 10/9 thing, and he's closer to the box, and he looks like a player who's reinvigorated by that. And I think a lot of people are going to contrast that with Aubameyang. I've gone 180 degrees on this Aubameyang performance. I started with him as sort of my stock falling guy who struggled. We had this vibrant attacking day and he wasn't really involved. But when I really squint and look at it a little closer, he had a very typical Aubameyang day. He just didn't get the end product from it. He had a far post run that's a tap in away from being a goal. He has a long, almost length of the pitch run that winds up with him firing a really hard shot straight at the keeper that on another day maybe gets between the keeper's hands or doesn't get kept out. He has another one that I'm not quite remembering that it's a redirect, right? It comes off somebody in the box. Maybe it was a Willian shot. Yeah, and then he redirects it and it just goes over. It's an instinctive move, but he's in the right position, the Aubameyang position. Yep. So I think the sort of shrugging of the shoulders and the looking disappointed, which you want your striker to look when he's not scoring goals, obscured for me a performance that is kind of the prototypical Aubameyang performance. Not very involved, but on another day it's a brace or a hat trick. So,
and he sets up the Tierney cross for Lacazette's fourth goal. That's Aubameyang who does the run up the pitch and passes it out to Tierney.
Yeah, so while I don't want to say, hey, vintage Aubameyang, he's back, I think I've come around from the idea that this was another in a string of worrying Aubameyang performances to saying this is closer to what you expect his contribution to be like. So where on that spectrum do you fall in terms of wasn't involved enough, disappointing, or sort of closer to what an Aubameyang performance should look like?
I thought that was a completely typical Aubameyang performance, just without a goal. Mm-hmm. I think kind of what begins to happen, particularly when you get, should we say, like new shiny players in the team or exciting players, is that, and I think we probably all do it to some degree or other, even if just subconsciously, is you start to write off what used to be there before, and you start to look for reasons that, like Martinelli literally started a couple of games because Aubameyang wasn't fit, right? And he played really, really well in one of them and quite well in the second one. And so all of a sudden it's not just about Martinelli being good. you kind of look for reasons why he was better than the other guy. So you start to look super critically at the other guy. And a lot of the kind of commentary I was seeing like online during this game, I saw a lot of people complaining about things that I've never seen Aubameyang do. You know, like, he's not involved enough. He's not, I mean, well, I'd say he's not combining enough. I think Paul's quite right. Go back and look at that fourth goal again. It's, you know, Aubameyang does combine with Tierney. And look, I'm sure he would prefer to have been in Lacazette's position than the one he was in, but he was there and he did the job. And, you know, like I was kind of looking at it and looking at what people were saying. And I was like, when has Aubameyang ever done any of those things? Like, he's a low touch player that scores goals like that's and gets in positions. And he was getting in positions again in this game. You know, he got one big chance against Brighton. I was never hugely worried, you know, that the cliff had come for Aubameyang or anything like that. I thought there were that for his form so far, and I think there have been real green shoots as the team has played better. That said, that there are some questions that Arteta's going to be thinking about probably as we speak. We've already gone into the can Aubameyang and Martinelli play in the same team one already, but the other one, Elliot, you kind of prefaced in your question to me is Lacazette a better fit here than Aubameyang? We all know who the better player is, but if you put Martinelli on the left and Saka on the right, and Smith Rowe number 10, yeah. Is Lacazette because Lacazette comes short and combines, and he can do that because Martinelli will run in behind, Smith Rowe will run in behind, Saka, like they will all run in behind him. You know, two of them will run in behind him, one will come and combine with him. You know, the balance of that front four arguably looks better. Now, I think it's probably a bit early to say that, and we should acknowledge how fucking unbelievably quickly things change. If I'd have told you, Elliot, 3 weeks ago that we'd be having a discussion about whether Lacazette is a better fit for our front four because Smith Rowe's come in for 3 games and
our embarrassment of riches.
Exactly, yeah, because like Smith Rowe, who we all knew the talent of, but perhaps doubted the physical prowess has come in for 3 games and absolutely bossed it, and Saka has been playing on the right and has looked an absolute looked even better. Like, all of these things were unforeseeable a couple of weeks ago, so I'm not ready to say yep, Lacazette's better, get thee gone Aubameyang. And look, the fact is, going back to the conversation we had at the beginning of the podcast, we're going to need all of them. Like, we're going to need to figure out a way not just to play a front four, but how we're going to have like 7 or 8 players who can play on a front four on any one game. And that's why I think the Newcastle game is so interesting, because I think we'll see Willian and Pepe again. Maybe we'll see Nketiah up front. And then that's like, is that the come down, or is that actually we've seen the way here. We've seen a way that the football should be played. Do they get the confidence boost? And I think we'll see some things in that Newcastle game that will perhaps give us, a little bit of clarity. But ultimately, in 2 to 3 weeks, how these things go, particularly when you do a podcast about when you do 2 podcasts about every single
6
game.
podcasts.
Yeah, you get very meta and very micro. And you start to understand how quickly things change and how quickly conversations move on. If the next game was not Newcastle in the FA Cup, though, and let's say it was a Premier League game, I think the question is maybe on pause, because both Aubameyang and Martinelli are feeling their way back from injuries, different injuries, but at the moment, for the next maybe the next couple of games, you can afford to rotate that position and say it's due to their fitness and that you're looking after them. But sooner or later, this question is going to crop up again. And I think the answer for Arteta is to try and find a way that, 7, like someone like Pepe, for example, how can he contribute? How can he slot into this team? How does Willian slot back into this team? Because whether we like it or not, that's who we've got. Those are the things that Arteta, I hope and think, is probably thinking about. I think he's probably thinking, okay, this front four works for now because teams haven't seen it before. They've seen it now. And, the next time they play together, the next set of opponents is going to be a little bit wiser, and they might not allow that second goal to happen again. And so we'll have to find answers to that, and that might include rotation and things like that. So for me, it's great that we found, at least for now, a front four that seems to work together. It's about finding other combinations as well.
Yeah, this is where I think, unfortunately, sometimes the club should guide selection decisions in a way. That's probably not right, but what I mean is, so Tim, Aubameyang is the present. We are committed to him in a very expensive way for 3 years. Martinelli is the future. We hopefully will be committed to him for a very long time at a very high level. Lacazette is the past, in that I can't imagine we're going to give him a new contract. I mean, look, I think the guy has done a brilliant job to raise his level, but we can't be giving him another contract. It's just not the right thing for this club to do at this point. So at that level, would you say that, like, that situation, the fact that we're very invested in Aubameyang succeeding for a few seasons with us, and very invested in Martinelli developing and succeeding with us, means that there's an incentive to try to make that group work more than there is an incentive for Lacazette to work. Now, of course, you don't want to do that at the expense of winning football games, but if it's a close call, that probably weighs into the decision-making, you would think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, like, I've said this Aubameyang and Martinelli thing a lot of times, but I don't think it's impossible. And I think he has to find a way, because there is just no way that we can have one of those players on the bench, at least not for another kind of 2 seasons or so. Like, Martinelli is not the kind of talent who, in my view, needs... It's not one of those where you're like, oh, maybe you can rotate and bring him in slowly. Like,
10
Martinelli
starts this season, 15... No, just play him. He's a star.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Martinelli, Saka, these are play them, guys, and play them now. Like, they're ready. It's fine. The only question is physical, really. It's not to do with their kind of ability at all. So we have to find a way for Aubameyang and Martinelli to work together. And for me, that way is very much about playing Martinelli off the left, Aubameyang up front, save his legs, have Martinelli chasing back, looking at, protecting fullbacks and stuff like that, and they can dovetail, they can move inside and outside each other. The fact that they like to occupy the same space, to me, that's not so much of a problem, because, oh no, now we've got 2 players in front of the goal. Shit. That's not a problem. That is absolutely not a problem to have 2 players who like attacking the box. That's good. It's better than having one. Yeah. The issue is more, and I think it's easy to work on their movements and things like that. I think that can come quite easily. It's more the fact that they're low touch. I think that's the thing you've got to crack at. That means playing 2 high touch players with them, and we know that Saka is going to be one of those. Fine, solved. It's looking like Smith Rowe could be another. So let's find more players like that.
Yeah, and you say, look, Saka, Willian, and ESR look like they will be the future, and players that we have to invest heavily in and start to really make the foundation of the first team. But because of the contract we've given out to Aubameyang, you almost have to put him into that group as a guy who's got to work. It has to work.
And I think that could help Willian as well if his role is simplified, because he's a guy who's kind of out on the right, but we're asking him to drift into the centre and stuff like that. No, if you've got like Martinelli and Aubameyang, kind of left centre forward, Willian can do his Willian thing that he has always done, which is hug that right touch line and fucking stay there. That is all he has ever done his whole career. I've got no idea why we thought he should do something different. But if you've got Martinelli, Aubameyang, Tierney over on that left hand side, then Willian can he doesn't have to try and do 2 jobs at once. He can do his drop the shoulder, get the ball in, and you know what, when he gets the ball in, we got 2 players who want to attack the ball. So I think it could help him too.
Alternatively, you could get Willian a Duolingo account to learn Chinese and hope that they're still buying expensive players. But, I've heard it both ways. I mean, I have to give you credit, Tim, because you're right. Like, finding a way to make Willian work is a good thing. I just don't know that there's a lot of appetite for people right now being sympathetic to that idea. Look, I mean, Lacazette had a ridiculous 1.77 expected goals in this game, which is bananas. But like Aubameyang had 0.85. Like if you do that every game, you're right among the absolute best strikers in football. And I realize you can't, that's not how those statistics are meant to work, but it's the point that like he did the Aubameyang stuff just without the goal. Clive, since Willian came up, let's talk about this. I mean, when it was time to make the switch, it was Willian that comes on and not Pepe. And, you know, I think that this was a thing that for a lot of people was really discouraging. I don't know that I cared because I wasn't going to let anything ruin my enjoyment of 4-0 over Sam Allardyce on a day when we played our best attacking football of the season and probably the best half we've had since Arteta got here. So no, I was thrilled regardless. And he had a shot on target, his second of the season. So let's give credit where it's due. But I do think that raises some eyebrows, and I think it is a question that is worth asking now, which is, do you think we're moving into a situation where whatever you think of the talent, the Pepe Arsenal career thing just looks like it's on a trajectory to not work out, that we probably need to cash in on that and reevaluate how we address that position? Because, Willian comes on, he's fine. We've got Willian. We're not going to be able to offload him. Pepe still probably has some value in the market. Am I reading too much into this, or are we starting to see a pretty clear indication from Arteta and the club that it's just not going to happen, you know?
No, I just thought it was a cold day. And, I think sometimes it was a cold day, and he brought on the player that probably wasn't freezing, right? So that's it. I didn't read anything into it. People have their views on Pepe, and that's absolutely fine. He's suddenly been kicked to the turf. Never going to play again. He could easily play again. He could easily play on the right, and Saka could play 10. If Saka plays 10, we'd probably think, because he's going to be so good at it, that we'd probably think, what's Smith Rowe where's he going to go? The trick is, let's get a few more players like this who are quite smart and good. You look at Man City yesterday, I don't think anybody watched it. They got loads of these players. Mahrez came off the bench. They got Ferran Torres that wasn't in the squad. They've got Bernardo Silva, Foden, De Bruyne, smart, intelligent, attacking midfielders. Sterling, loads. We need to, if you're thinking, considering we've got a manager that's just come from there, if you're thinking what's the future of Arsenal, there's room for a Pepe, a one stand-up dribbler who's like the Mahrez of the squad. There's room for a Smith Rowe. There's room for a Saka. There's room for these players. We need more of them. We need to be comfortable with certain people not starting all the time. You know, because the last couple of weeks, look at Bellerin has a couple of weeks off, look much better for it. Much better for a couple of games off. Tobias, who I'm not really a super fan of, look much better after having a couple of games sitting down. We've got to get comfortable with it, because that's the modern game, isn't it? And the modern game is you play every 3 days, and you can't do it with 1-11. And so what we need to be thinking about is, what types do we need? You know, what types of players? And those players that can take the ball off back foot, half turn, can travel both ways. When we lose the ball, they can counter press. They can do that. Now, Pepe is maybe one that sticks out a little bit, because he's very individual, not always clean, but can do some magical things, but you don't know when they're coming. A bit like Mahrez. He doesn't play every week for City. Doesn't play every week. Sterling had to make his game a lot more solid, you know, a lot more defensively minded, so he could be playing every week. That wasn't always the case when he was at Liverpool and his early days at Man City. He had to go and earn it. And will Pepe make it? I'm not so sure. I'm generally 50-50, but I hope he does, because his talent and things that he can do are significant. And again, we just forget people very, very quickly. And Willian, I'm less enamoured with, just due to the age, we spoke about Tierney transmitting certain things to us. Willian does not transmit things to me that make me think I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Do you know what I mean? So that's the one that bothers me a little bit. And if you think we just don't do that deal, and you're watching the emergence of Saka and Smith Rowe 3 months later, you think yourself, crikey, somebody at the club's thinking, did we need to do that? You know, really has come that quickly. But Martinelli's only just come back in. So you look at it all and you think, actually, no one could maybe see Smith Rowe's ascension to being so quick. Martinelli we knew about. He seems to have come back in good shape. So it's a gamble, right? But you don't take a 3-year gamble when you've got that amount of talent in your club. And these guys are not secrets to the club. They know all about them. But you can never quite tell when they're going to hit development-wise. I sent out a tweet before the game about Smith Rowe's, trying to compare him to Conor Gallagher, who played for West Brom. And Conor Gallagher was in the under-17 team, and he was probably ahead of Smith Rowe. He went away to Swansea last year on loan, did really, really well, and ends up at West Brom on loan. I'm thinking you've had more probably game time than Smith Rowe, and bang, Smith Rowe ate him at the weekend. Much better player on this day at this period. Conor Gallagher was doing fantastically 2 months ago, and suddenly had a little bit of a dip. It's very difficult for the club to work this out and to work out who's going to be in the team, who's going to stay in the team. So for me, I look at player types. I said what I said earlier. Let's get some more smart footballers who are good, that work in a certain work ethic. Pepe's got to develop that. If he doesn't, he might not make it, but I really do hope he does make it.
Can I ask you a question about the thing that I was discussing with Tim? I mean, where do you stand? You do some coaching at a level where, the economics are obviously very different. So, it's probably not something that you have to really weigh at that level. But in terms of, coaches have to win today, but managers, directors of football, they have to plan for the future. What do you think that right balance is of selecting teams based on what you're trying to build for the future? In the sense that, realistically, we kind of need Aubameyang to play more than Lacazette because of what we've committed to economically. Martinelli, Saka, Smith Rowe, they have to play because of the future. Tierney's an obvious one. Gabriel would be another obvious one. We're all obviously kind of critical of the Saliba situation for that very same reason, because of the economics of that deal and the planning that was meant to be done. And so when you look at a Willian versus Pepe, Willian maybe on large money that we just gave him, Pepe maybe a little more resellable. Do you think that these decisions, these sort of structural squad building decisions, do factor into how you pick the team and who gets the playing time, or do you think they shouldn't, if they do?
It absolutely does factor. Absolutely does. Your contract basically dictates the hierarchy, right? So you have different levels of contracts at Arsenal. You have your top contracts, you have your senior pro contract, then you have your mid-level contract, like your Willocks and them on their 40 granders, Maitland-Niles, that sort of range. And you have your Holdings and your Chambers on the 60 granders, and there'll be wage levels within the club. And you don't really want one of your high wage earners sitting there not playing. And so you'll always give that player probably a chance. And that happens down at non-league as well. If we're playing, somebody playing a player on 200 quid a week and he's not playing, that's a big deal. Now, non-league, they can just go to another club, so it's not the end of the world. But it's a big deal. If you've got a contracted player that's on good money and he's not paying, sitting on your bench, and you're still paying him the money, that's not smart, right? And it's even more prevalent at that level because there's not that much money to throw around. So it does make a difference. Contract length, wages, bonuses, appearances. These are the unseen stuff that really does drive the hierarchy in the dressing room. So when you make a decision on somebody, you better be really thinking about it smartly. You better make sure you're giving that person a chance. So you can say, I played him for 5 games. He did nothing for me. You know what I mean? It literally is like that.
Yeah, maybe not at Arsenal, Clive, but I can imagine at Chelsea, for example, if Lampard wasn't picking Timo Werner, he's going to get a call from Roman Abramovich being like, hey, I paid a lot of money for this guy. Why is he not in your team? Whereas at Arsenal, I'm not sure who would make that call.
You might get a call from Adidas, for example.
Good point.
You might get
a
call from an agent. This is the world of football. It really is. How you walk through the door empowers you. It actually empowers you. You often hear me say the thing, watch the video when David Luiz joined Arsenal. Watch it, and you will see all you need to see about how empowered he felt. Walking into our club thinking he can run the show. There are things that happen behind the scenes with agents, with sponsorships, with deals, with companies, with clauses, appearance money, goals, bonuses, win bonuses. Trust me, there's a whole new world out there, a whole new world. And the club manages out on a day-to-day basis, And it does make some of the selections to us feel a little bit weird. But there are other drivers behind it. I'm not saying that happens with Arsenal, but you say it does happen. And when you're looking to exit somebody, sometimes you need to play them to exit them. Or sometimes you just need to show them, to say back to people, to say, look, you've played, here's your data, you haven't quite done it. We need to move you, start looking for something. There are so many different ways and styles of moving with behind the scenes, if you see what I mean. I'm not going to say this is what Arsenal are doing. But I just want to make it clear there's a lot that goes into selection and keeping players, and contracts are a massive part of that, and they define someone's stability within the hierarchy of a dressing room. And only when a player like Smith Rowe comes along and literally rips the shirt off someone's back, that's what you got to do when you're a young player. Do exactly what he's done. I'm coming in and I'm ripping the shirt off somebody's back, and you've got to make adjustments for me now. And that's your dream as a young player, doing exactly what Smith Rowe's doing.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of the players almost like a stock market in a way, right? Like you have your cost, your sunk cost, how much money, what your acquisition cost was, what your cost average is for owning them. Is their stock going up? Can you sell them for more than you bought them for? Is their stock going down? Are you losing money on them because they're not playing things? And you don't want to pick your team every day based on that stock market evaluations. But I think at some level, when you give like an Aubameyang $300,000 a week, it's inevitable that those kinds of things weigh in when you pay £72 million for a player like we did with Pepe. Now, I think in that case, like a Pepe, because it was Raul's deal and it's a deal that's a little bit shady as it's been dug into, and there may be extenuating circumstances there, but like with a Willian, especially if Arteta had if he was involved in the pursuit of Willian, and there's disputed accounts of that, but if he was, you have a much harder time saying to ownership, hey, I'm not playing this guy we just gave a big contract to late in his career who I wanted because he stinks. So all of these things become a complication. Now, as great as things have been, Paul, I think the area where we could still see improvement is midfield, because I think a lot of this has been happening not because of midfield, but in spite of midfield. Now, to be fair, I thought, Xhaka was a man of the match against Chelsea, and I thought Ceballos actually grew into this match well and played perfectly fine. But midfield isn't the oil in the engine for this resurgence. It's the three behind the one. It's the role of Lacazette playing more as a traditional number 9. It's the fullbacks joining in. A lot of our build-up and our threat comes from the fullbacks, Smith Rowe, Saka, Lacazette. Not so much from midfield. Now, to be fair, central midfield doesn't have to be the final ball piece, but I do think that there's an opportunity for that department to really improve. And I think with Partey's return on the horizon and his progressiveness and his ability to just punch that ball forward quickly, into someone like a Smith Rowe, I think that it's exciting thinking about how that can change the dynamic. So do you sort of agree with the premise that central midfield is the next department that can improve? And do you have some thoughts on maybe how it might look when Partey comes back? Has Ceballos made it a case for being the guy who plays there? Do you think, he'll stick with Xhaka despite the fact that those two don't always look complementary? How do you see midfield shaping up?
Yes, in terms of the area where we can really pick up. I don't have any deep thoughts on this except Partey good, 4 legs bad. No, that's not quite right. Partey good, right? And I think, we've seen Partey and what's the name of that other midfielder? Oh yeah, El Neni. We've seen those two guys playing good. Ceballos will look a lot better with the Partey there because he's got more coverage there, and we kind of group Ceballos with the too many touches, side to side, doesn't play fast enough. I don't actually think that's Ceballos. That's kind of just the rut our midfield got into. So I think he can definitely uptick here. But even as it is, even with Ceballos, say, and Xhaka, when you see what Smith Rowe does really well is just drop in and become that third midfielder. He's just 5-10 yards ahead of them. There's a turnover, he'll drop in, pick up the ball, and bring it upfield. That's what he did for Huddersfield time and time again. They were a team who had to sit a bit deeper because they were 17th, 18th in the table, 19th. So they were typically under pressure in midfield, and he'd drop in, he'd be the third guy. So even without Partey, I think our midfield is already better, and can get a little better still. I think Partey plus Xhaka will actually be pretty good because Partey, Smith Rowe, and Xhaka in your midfield takes a lot of pressure off Xhaka. He doesn't have to be the guy. And, sometimes you have to wipe your eyes and think, is like even in this game, Xhaka's kind of low key against West Brom, but he's actually pretty good. He's moving that ball around, like the side to side. Let me think, make sure I got this right. Yeah, so the Saka goal starts with a Bellerin throw in and Ceballos on the right, and Ceballos scrambles through a tackle, knocks it off to the left. Xhaka up to the wing to Aubameyang, who's on the left. Back to Xhaka, to Ceballos, up to Bellerin. So it goes through Ceballos and Xhaka. Now, it's kind of low-key stuff, but they move it along quite nicely, and they do that stuff well. And like when you're beginning to hum and buzz a little bit, you got a little more space. I think Ceballos, Xhaka, there's mileage even within this midfield for it to improve, and I think it has improved. And I think Partey's a significant upgrade that'll buy even more time and space for Xhaka, who's a pretty good hustler in midfield. He's been one of our most pressing players in one or two of these games, especially against Chelsea. Ceballos was actually our pressing agent in this game. He had 21 presses. The next was Aubameyang with 12 and 11, 10 for the other guys. But Ceballos was 21, so you never quite know who's going to have the freedom to make something happen. But I think Partey buys us a lot. Smith Rowe buys us a lot, and we're already beginning to see some of that. So I think our midfields, if Smith Rowe keeps playing at this level, and that's a question mark, but this is what he did at Huddersfield from what I could see of it. So it's not just 3 games. This is like, go and look at, there's a 9-minute highlights of Smith Rowe at Huddersfield. Go and have a look at it. It's just back to back. He only started 13 games for them, and yet this thing is just full of like 3-4 second clips of him doing exactly what you've seen him do for us in the last 3 games. This is who he is, I pray.
Well, I mean, Clive, Tim, I have a question for you, but I want to let Clive in just for a second, because I know you have a strong thought about what happens when Partey and Xhaka play together, or at least you've talked about it in the past. Do you think it's important to kind of get Xhaka out of the lineup when Partey comes back so he can take the role of being the central figure in the midfield, the hub that everything flows through? Because when we've seen them play together, and I realize we're talking about a very small sample size, but it's tended to leave Xhaka with the role of being the primary distributor.
Yeah, the way we use the second person in a double pivot can vary. Sometimes Nelly drops it on the right-hand side to make the back 3. Xhaka's dropping to the left-hand side to make the back 3. If Xhaka does the left-hand side back 3 thing, Partey needs to be in the middle of the pitch. He just sees the game really well, and he goes and engages more often, and he can obviously do more things when the ball arrives at him. So he's not just restricted to a pass off one foot. If the lanes are blocked, he can just run through the gap and then play the pass, and obviously we're moving forward. So for me, Partey will be that central player. If I'm signing for Arsenal, if I'm him, apart from the 2.5 times wage jump, I'm thinking I want to be central, and eventually the philosophy will probably move to a 4-3-3, although I'm not so sure. But if it does go to 4-3-3, then he's perfectly suited to the guy at the base, but can also play up on the right or left-hand side, so it doesn't really matter. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because Xhaka is a very dominant personality, and he wants everything to come through him, and I'm not sure he can defer like El Neni does and like Ceballos does on occasion. I'm just not sure if that's in him. I'd like to think it is. I've seen him play for Switzerland, and he has a very strong running Vieira lookalike playing with him. I've forgotten his name now, so apologies. Who plays in centre midfield with Zakaria? That's it. Zakaria, who plays in central midfield with him. And that's when I first saw those two together. I thought that's the future for Arsenal. It took about 4 years to get here, right? So, but Zakaria is not as good on the ball, in my opinion, as Partey is, and not as creative. He's a strong running player that drives, covers, tackles. So yeah, it's gonna be. I'm just not sure how it's going to look. And my opinion is that we need a change in there eventually in the summer, and it should be Partey's midfield, and then we put people around him, which allow him to move this along into a different direction, and that's perfectly fine. You know, Xhaka's been here a fair long time. We all know what he is. And it's time to move on, and that should happen a lot more quickly on a number of players at Arsenal. But hey, we know the drill here, don't we? So there you go. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. Well, so then on that note, let's finish with this, Tim. It is the transfer window. It is your specialty, this topic. So I want to make sure to ask you about it. But all kidding aside, I mean, look, There's rumors Saliba going to Nice on loan, which I think makes sense. That's a situation that I think we botched, but whatever. I mean, him going to Nice seems fair. Some other players maybe going out, whether Reece Nelson, Joe Willock, I think makes sense in both cases. But the issue really centers around, I know we're looking apparently at Julian Brandt, we're looking at Emi Buendia, and the Buendia links seem to be the hottest links of all. This is a tricky situation for any club, right? Every single human being who knows anything about Arsenal 8 weeks ago would have said Arsenal need to target an attacking midfielder, a creative influence in the center of the park. In the summer, we went for Aouar, which obviously was sensible. We were linked with Szoboszlai, sensible. And now here comes Smith Rowe. A 20-year-old guy with a big injury track record, but who looks to be a big, big talent, who is playing the way we would dream a player in that position would play so far in a small sample size. Where do you stand on the idea of going and getting a guy like Buendia? How you manage the expectation of the development of a player like Smith Rowe with the clear need to have a senior central attacking midfield type presence, another facilitator, another creator in the team, or maybe we don't have the clear need. Maybe it should all fall on Smith Rowe. I mean, how, we have made this mistake, right? We had Pepe and we bought Willian and we moved Iwobi on to presumably make room for Saka, but we bought Lacazette, then we bought Aubameyang, right? There are times when it seems you need to reinforce a position and go big to do that, and times when you worry it can block the paths of other players. So how does a club get this right? I think this is one of those tricky situations where, depending on your perspective, you could find a way to praise the club for its ambition or damn them for whatever you perceive the error to be. Do you have a sense of how you manage a tough situation like this? A young, injury-prone player that is impressing in an area that just 8 weeks ago would have clearly been prioritized as the most urgent area of need.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing is your communication with the individual. I imagine in this scenario that would come from Edu. So let's say we're looking to buy that player. That's where your communication with the individual comes in, and you say, look, we are looking to buy someone in this area. That's because you're literally the only thing we have like this, and as a club we need a bit more than that. And obviously we're looking after your development as well. We're looking after your body. We're usually in the Europa League. Hopefully we'll be in the Europa League as a minimum next year again. There are plenty of games. And, there's games for everybody there. In terms of, so I think you just kind of explained that to him. And I still don't think 3 games is quite enough to go from, oh no, we're just gonna we're just gonna let you carry this. And we've done that with young players before, and it's pretty much never ended well. We've ruined their bodies, and that's been the end of it, and it's hurt the club as well. So I think you can have a mature conversation with the guy and say, look, we've shown you what we think of you. We played you against Chelsea when we hadn't won for 2 months. We believe in you. And then we continue to play you afterwards, but you can't play every minute of every game. You know that, we know that. And look, you're at Arsenal. There's going to be a bit of competition and rotation and stuff like that. So I think you have that conversation, and you can say to him, we still think of you as the first choice. This guy's coming to compete with you, whatever. But really, I think the best way to treat this from a kind of a technical or strategic viewpoint, again fitting in with the point earlier of having 7 or 8 players that can fit into that front four, is and to be fair, if Brandt and Buendia are the players that we're looking at, and it sounds like we are, it kind of sounds like we're doing this, have someone who can play like number 8, number 10 and wide, just have another creative player. And I know Paul spoke about this on the Instant Reaction podcast as well. You need more than one. Fabregas for me was at his best in an Arsenal shirt when he had Rosicky and Kleb either side of him, those secondary creators. So I think Saka looks like a good secondary creator, maybe even more than that. But we need something more in there, and that's the end of it. And the way you set that up with the player as well is you say, okay, we can rely on you and only you. And you can try and play 55 games a season, and we might finish 8th, and we might, go far in one of the cups or whatever. Or we can buy someone to support and rotate with you and compete with you and perhaps play in different positions behind the front player. And, we can get in the top 4 and we can win a trophy. Which one would you prefer? I think I know which one the player would prefer. It's like, do you want 35 games in a really good team, or do you want 50 games in an average team? But I think really, aside from all those conversations, having that player who can do a bit of both, who can play right, left, and number 10, and Buendia can do that. I understand that Julian Brandt can as well. I don't know as much about that player. And then, just giving yourself different options so that, again, you've got 7 or 8 players who can fit into that front 4. And then you say to like Smith Rowe or someone like that, look, we'll play you with this guy. This guy might go and play on the left. He might go and play on the right. You might go and play on the left or the right while he plays number 10, and you can come in and combine. Like good players will always be interested with playing with other good players. So I think as long as we make it known to Smith Rowe how important, and Saka and players like that, how important we regard them to be, and you kind of say we want to do this to supplement you. We want to do this to bring in guys who we think are in line with what we see your ceiling as, so that you can play and be a big part of a really big team. But yeah, let's have someone that can. And I think, to be fair, most modern creative players are capable of playing right, left, or centre. Yeah, and I mean, I think it is. You're never going to get this perfectly right, but you look at a Manchester City. They used to play De Bruyne and Silva together with sort of one holder behind them in a 4-3-3, right? So maybe it's Partey at the base, and it's a Buendia and an ESR ahead of them playing sort of the Silva and De Bruyne roles. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can play it. You can, as you said, move them left or right into the front line if you need to. I think the key for me is you want, ideally, that player you go get. If you really like Smith Rowe's potential, and I think we probably do, I'd like that guy we get to be someone who can be a little more box to box. Maybe that's not, maybe I'm asking for a unicorn at that point. A box to box creative player scores goals and gets assists, and Kevin De Bruyne is not on the market. So I don't know. It'll all be determined in time. I think we should leave it there, and because we got a lot more coming up. The table is looking so much different now. And the one thing I will say about adding players, if you're back in the Europa League next season, if you're back in Europe, you have a lot more games, you have a lot more ways to get players onto the pitch and contributing. If we are a 1 game a week club next season, what you need in a squad and what you can afford in a squad is very different. So you're rolling the dice a little bit in January with the hope that it pays out at the end of the season. And the way the table looks now, I mean, who knows? Frank Lampard about to get the sack, potentially, and now Mikel Arteta looking like the genius again that we all thought he was and believed in him from the start. So that's good. We have a lot more coming up. We'll have a feature on Smith Rowe tomorrow. We'll have a transfer pod on Wednesday. We'll have an analytics pod, I think, on Thursday, and then another pod for everybody on Friday. So a full week of content as we finally get a week off of Arsenal playing every 10 minutes. But we'll be doing a pod every 10 minutes. So one replaces the other. In any event, thanks, everybody. Paul's on Twitter. Pause my pants. Thanks, Pause. No. All right. Tim's on Twitter. Roberto. Thanks, Tim. My pleasure as always.
Clive's on Twitter. Clive PFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
Paul's on Twitter. Pause my pants. Thanks, Pause. No. Still no. Woohoo! There we go. Got him in.
Woohoo!
At the end. There it is.
Apologies, I was in one of my feisty moods today.
I assumed you were
sulking.
No. I assumed you were just recording a video. In any event, we love you. Thank you so much for being here. Happy 2021. Things looking up for the Arsenal. Hopefully looking up for the Globe as well. Come on, Globe. Come on, you Blue Rock. And that's good. And so I guess it's Newcastle. Do we know when that is? It's a Saturday game at the Emirates? Is that
Saturday,
right?
Yep, Saturday, 5:30.
5:30 Saturday for the FA Cup. The Arsenal Invitational begins in earnest against Newcastle on Saturday. So we look forward to that. We look forward to talking to you all week. Hope you're taking care of yourself. Hope you're doing well. I know the lockdowns are a little tricky for everybody, but we are here together and we love you. And we will talk to you after Arsenal 10, Newcastle 0.